I'm Max Clark. This is 20 Minutes Max. I'm going to do a little rant about something that's near and dear to my heart, which we now call desktop as a service. I have no idea who came up with this name, and I really hate it and despise it. But, when, 1997, we called it terminal services, and then after that, we called it virtual desktop, and now it's called DaaS. And funny thing about this is how cyclic things in technology actually are, right? So in the birth of computing, we had what you now would think of as a mainframe. But there was it was really funny because they actually called them mini computers, but they weren't so mini. They were quite large. But so, university, a large company would have this really large centralized computer, and then there were terminals connected to it. So what you saw on the terminal was just a screen. It was just the input and the output device, right? A keyboard connected and a screen and the ability to send, but it was really just this computer off in the basement somewhere, and you were interacting with that, and that's what you had. And there was job scheduling and time slicing and all these different things. We could talk about the birth of the internet as a relation to this in a moment. But the birth of personal computing really did a few things. It drove down the cost and the affordability of computers, and it made it accessible for people to have them in their houses. Whenever you get into a situation where volume applies against a commodity, with more volume, the price of the commodity drives down. So what happens? The personal computer gets faster and faster and faster and faster and costs less and less and less and less per unit of computing. Meanwhile, these other things, these mainframes, are still very expensive and, like these giant black boxes that sit in the basement that are nightmares. And we have this massive push and shift away from centralized computing into, edge. Oh, we got the edge in there. Edge computing. We got, with personal computers and devices. We saw this, of course, in the 90s, the birth of the internet, and then, really through the 2000s. And, we keep pushing forward. So anyways, okay, let's go. Trying to bring us all back together, Max. So terminal services and VDI and now DaaS are a push back into this full circle. It's closing a loop. So now you've got a centralized resource. You've got, usually a cluster of machines. Cluster is another one of my favorite terms, but you've got a series of computers running usually in a data center, and the desktop, the processing, the storage, everything that's happening is happening on those machines in that central location, and then a remote terminal is connecting to it. Now, first question I get when we talk about this stuff usually is people say, well, what does it look like? Well, it looks exactly like what you're experiencing right now. Instead of having a box with a processor and a graphics card and a hard drive underneath your desk or on top of your desk or built into your monitor, all you really see is just the monitor and the keyboard and the mouse or the trackpad, right? There's a network cable that plugs into it. It's still Windows, okay? Like, secret ingredient of the secret ingredient soup is there is no secret ingredient. It is still Windows, and you can connect to these things with dedicated terminals. You can connect to it with fancy terminals for specialized networking like PCOIP and Teradici and like yada, 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 or you can just use remote desktop, and you can remote desktop into one of these platforms. So you have some sort of client access device, and then you have your actual computing device, let's just call it that way, right? Where the actual desktop lives and where the data lives and the processing lives. Okay, so why do you care? Why do we care about DaaS? And this is where tech marketing, and we just go completely sideways in the tech space, right? Because we start talking about speeds and feeds and features and benefits, and we miss the jobs to be done. So why do we care about this stuff? Well, the first thing is, it is ridiculously easy to onboard and offboard staff when you have centralized computing like this. You are not going out and touching a machine in a desktop in a cubicle and configuring it. Or, what normally would happen in a help desk is, they would have, and they'd bring the computer back to their help desk, and they would do the work, and they would install Windows on it, install the software, and then take it out to the computer. By the way, MDM and UEM is a solution in absence of a DaaS platform. Because in a DaaS platform, you say, hey, we want to update our software. What do? You have a centralized thing that you have to update, and it automatically updates everything else. There is no oh, whoops, I kicked over my computer tower and blew it up, right? Like that doesn't happen. So, okay, very easy to onboard and offboard when you have, an office environment, and people don't have to walk up and down the stairs and go talk to your help desk. Your help desk can all be in one location. Your IT team can be in one spot, and it's really easy. Okay. Now, when you go from work from home, you go to remote workforce. Now, think about that from an onboarding and offboarding. What are you doing? Well, you are usually buying a laptop and shipping a laptop to somebody. And hopefully you're buying a laptop and then having it configured and then shipped. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're buying a laptop and shipping it to somebody and then creating a phone call with some sort of, team viewer session to go through and do the rest of the configuration, which is completely nuts. Or, you're doing an MDM enrollment, you're using Intune or, some variant, AirWatch or something, to actually do that deployment. So in theory that works fine. Okay, you've got a Mac fleet, right? So you've got Jamf preloaded with Apple Business and Business Manager, and a laptop unplugs or they open it up and boom, they go through the enrollment. So now you've got really expensive devices that you're shipping all over the place, and you've got them in the field, and they're breakable. So think about it from an economic standpoint. $3,000 laptops being like FedExed all over the place. And then you've got to now offboard and reclaim all that equipment. What usually happens when offboarding is people don't reclaim the equipment. Maybe they issue a remote delete command and they say, okay, you can keep the gear. So if we think about this, in the last few months when companies have gone through massive layoffs, you're now writing down the value of the IT asset that's in the field because it's too complicated to try to even think about getting that gear back. It comes across as a really nice piece of like corporate goodwill and separation of like, oh, you can keep the device. But in reality, for the majority of those companies, they made the decision that it was not worth the energy for them to get the device back versus just writing it off and letting the employee keep it at separation. Yeah, I get a little cynical with these things because I've seen the sausage be made, so to speak. So that works great when you're in, like if you're a U.S. company and you're dealing with U.S. employees. Now let's talk about onboarding and offboarding somebody in Latin America. You have a team in Mexico or Colombia, Argentina, Chile, Brazil. You can't just ship them gear, first off. If you haven't done this yet, just trust me when I say this, or don't trust me. Go ahead and do it and experience this for the first time for yourself, and then you'll remember this. But you have this really pesky thing called customs that you have to deal with. So you're going to ship equipment to a country that has to clear customs first, and depending on when your gear gets to that port of entry and what else is on that port of entry and what the value of that equipment on that port of entry is, you go from like maybe this only takes 2 weeks to get gear to somebody to like 4, 5, 6 weeks to get gear to somebody. Plus you have to pay import duty taxes on it. This is why you want to buy equipment in country always. Versus shipping gear to them. So we talk about it from like, why is this relevant in the world of DaaS? Well, in DaaS, you can have a BYOD policy. It's not Friday. Why am I thinking BYOB? BYOD policy. Hey, you've already got a computer at your house. Great. You can just use that computer, install this software to connect to our DaaS platform. Look at this. You can use whatever you've got. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's slow. It doesn't matter if it's fast. It doesn't matter if it's new. It doesn't matter if it's old. You can just launch this application, or you can, use this browser plugin, and you can connect and you can get our desktop and you can get access to our environment and to our data. And it's instantaneously. We've accepted your offer. Your congratulations. You're coming on board. It's instant provisioning. You don't have to wait weeks to get somebody on and working and efficient. You can have them up and running like immediately, just like finger snap kind of fast. What else is great about DaaS? Well, in that example, where the data lives. So this becomes a really interesting example when you're going through any sort of compliancy. If you're going to go through a SOC or HIPAA or PCI, if you're bringing on international employees or contractors, if you have U.S. employees or contractors, you talk about where does the data actually live. If you've been around the block at some point, you've heard a horrible story about somebody who had a laptop in their car and the laptop in their car had data on it it shouldn't have because they were doing something. They downloaded all this data to Excel and then the car got stolen, and then there's an Excel file on the desktop that has everybody's social security number and salary information and home address and birth date. Whoops. Seriously, this happens all the time, right? You're doing software development, you're a tech company, you're an internet company, and you start talking about your application stack, your intellectual property, the, crown jewels. Does that sit on devices that you control, or can that be downloaded and copied onto devices that you can't control? Been a few lawsuits about this recently involving self-driving cars and executives leaving one company and going to another company and stuff being downloaded or not. If you just remove the ability for it to be downloaded, like you don't even have this conversation. It's not even like you need a policy around it in your corporate handbook of like, don't download our data. Just don't make it possible to download the data in the first place. It's incredible the difference that you have. So that's a really good example. When you start talking about supply chain issues, you get a question from a upstream or downstream vendor or client. How do you ensure that our data or your data is only on company-owned equipment? You're dealing with laptops. You deal with it by deploying, an MDM or UEM solution, and then self-signed certificates, and then you're going to use some sort of DLP and CASB, overlay on top of that, and maybe a ZTNA client in order to, authenticate the user, and you've got some sort of strong authentication and MFA and all these different things. And so now we're just talking about layering. We've just layered on like stack of different pieces of software in order to ensure this stuff. Or you just don't do any of it, and you just say, hey, okay, great. Our data only exists on our platform in our data center, or in this case, our vendor's infrastructure. They're the platform that we're our private cloud for this. There's no way for it to download because there's nowhere nowhere to download it to. They can't download this stuff. So we like that. You could talk about it from a ransomware security environment. Big issue and a big problem with ransomware is, if you've got, let's just do the math here, right? Let's just say you have 1,000, you have 1,000 devices. We'll just use 1,000. It's a nice round number. You have 1,000 devices. Maybe you're lucky and they're all in one office. Maybe you're not lucky and, 20% are in office and 80% are outside of an office, and you have a ransomware attack and all of your devices are encrypted. Well, now you've got to, what do you do? Well, you've got to, maybe best case scenario, you're just reinstalling an operating system on all those devices and formatting the hard drive. Well, it takes time. It takes time per device. Let's say you're exceedingly efficient at this and it only takes 30 minutes per device times 1,000 devices, right? So you've got 500 hours worth of work that you have to do in order to get your operations back in a point where people can actually work on a computer. So DaaS doesn't prevent ransomware. It accelerates recovery from it because you have this concept of a golden image, right? So there's this thing where it's like, for our fill in the blank team, they've got this is the environment that they need. They need this software. So you create this golden image, and this golden image is all the software that they need in order to run. So when you have a new person come into that team, you just say basically copy this golden image into their desktop. Well, now the process to recover 1,000 desktops is deleting and just recreating 1,000 desktops. And there's nuances and it's a lot more involved in that, but as a very simplistic example, I'll just make that case. And I'm sure I'll get a few comments. Go ahead and flame me. I don't care. Actually, I do care, but go ahead and flame me and tell me how wrong I am, and then we'll get into the nuances of this stuff if you really care about it. There's a lot of ways to implement DaaS. You're going to see this a lot more now. There were some companies that started doing this with Macs. Mac Stadium was a good one. People are so accustomed to developing on Mac desktops that it became like, hey, look, we can do a virtualized Mac. It's not even virtualized. It was Mac Minis in a data center in Atlanta, I believe. Azure is now, AWS offers virtualized Windows desktops. Azure has Azure Virtual Desktop, AVD. There's a lot of vendors that implement Citrix and VMware on top of Azure. There is automation orchestration platforms for this stuff. I'm going to let you in on the secret, which is, yes, you can use, Azure Virtual Desktop to do this stuff, but it's not easy to run yourself. It'd be the equivalent of deciding that you were going to install Exchange back in your office and run Exchange on-prem for your users versus being on 365 or being on Google Workspace. You could do it, but you're going to have to hire a lot of experts in order to do it. And then you'd be kind of crazy to do it because you're spending a lot of money in order to do it versus spending that money and those resources doing other things. And becoming experts in maintaining a DaaS platform is probably not where you want to be for your business. That's probably provides zero incremental value to your operations or zero incremental leverage to you. So you want to run DaaS, don't run it yourself. Again, it's a scale thing, right? Other people can go invest in data centers and they can invest in software licensing and they can invest in support staff and teams and experts and engineers and firewall people and all the different stuff, right? And you can pay them for that investment and they staff it 24/7 and they maintain it 24/7. You don't have to think about or deal with any of that stuff. And then of course you got a contract and they have an SLA that they have to adhere to. So we like these things. By the way, if you're saying, well, how does this apply to me? We run Macs today and we need to have access to all these development tools. Windows did this really crazy thing not too long ago, and it's called Windows Subsystem Linux, WSL. And the dirty secret is you can run a Windows desktop with WSL on it and get a Debian instance on it or whatever other instance you want. And you can code whatever code you want to code. You can code. You get access to the same tooling. And if you're building anything that's going containerized, the pipeline's actually really efficient. This is not, if you're coming from Mac to Windows, there is some learning curve, but I promise you, your developers are probably already running VS Code because you want to run GitHub Copilot on it. And guess what? VS Code is written by Microsoft and it runs just fine on Windows. And if you're running Python or Go or Node.js or, Ruby or any of these other languages and you're creating containers, that works just fine with WSL. And you can take advantage of it. So anyways, what is DaaS? DaaS is your desktop in the cloud. That's just, we'll just use, I hate the cloud term, but it's your desktop running in the cloud. And if you're onboarding and offboarding, and if you need to rapidly turn up a team somewhere, you want to hire 200 developers in Colombia. You want to hire 200 developers in Argentina. You want to bring on a customer service team in the Philippines. and you want to do it quickly, and you want to do it securely, and you want to have control over it, and you want to manage it, and you want to have control over your data, and you do not want to be shipping expensive boxes all over the place, and you don't have to worry about getting expensive boxes back or those expensive boxes breaking. DaaS is wonderful. It solves all of those problems for you, and it does it in a very efficient manner. So DaaS is great. We like DaaS, or VDI, or terminal services, or AVD, or whatever the heck you want to call it today. I don't even care anymore. The virtualized desktop is what's the expression? It's not a hammer looking for a nail. Like, it is a solution to a lot of problems, and you should be looking at it because it's awesome. Anyways, I'm Max. It's 20 minutes max. Hope this helps you.